There's a moment early in Duncombe House Diaries where you stop watching a renovation channel and start watching something else entirely. You can't quite put your finger on what it is. The crumbling plaster, the abandoned rooms, the objects left behind by people who never came back. It all adds up to a feeling that this house has been keeping secrets for a very long time. And as it turns out, that feeling was completely right. Because what Duncombe House Diaries has slowly confirmed, episode by episode, is that this isn't just a fixer-upper project. This building carries nearly 2 centuries of buried history. And once you understand what that actually means, everything about the channel starts to make a whole lot more sense. Most people watching Duncombe House Diaries don't know what they're actually looking at. They see a pretty, crumbling English country house in the middle of nowhere and assume it's just an old wreck someone was brave enough to buy. But the full picture is far more specific than that. The house sits within Calwich Park in Ellestone, Staffordshire, a piece of land with roots going back centuries. The estate passed through several notable hands before the Duncombe family acquired it in the 1840s. And it was Augustus Duncombe who is credited with constructing the house that Jack and Jazzy now own. Research places the construction between 1844 and 1876, with the design potentially attributed to William Byrne, a Scottish architect who worked extensively on grand Victorian estate buildings across Britain. The wider Calwich estate had previously hosted figures like the composer G.F. Handel, and the main Calwich Abbey was even rebuilt in the mid-19th century under the same Duncombe family ownership. In other words, the house that looks like a quiet country retreat on camera is actually a relic of one of the most culturally active rural estates in Victorian Staffordshire. That context alone changes everything. This isn't just old, it's layered, and the layers go deep. When Jack and Jazzy bought the property in 2024, anyone watching from the outside would have needed their head examined. The house had been sitting empty for several years before they arrived, and it hadn't sat quietly. 2 major floods had torn through the building, leaving behind damage that most sane people would have walked away from. One room had mushrooms growing directly from the ceiling. Not damp patches, mushrooms. Actual fungi feeding off the ruin of a 19th century interior. The electrics were effectively a museum exhibit. Wiring that dated back to the 1940s was still in place, still connected to nothing useful, still running through walls that hadn't been touched in decades. The plumbing was in a similar state. Systems that predated modern standards by generations, still lurking beneath the floors. And every room was full. Not empty, not cleared. Full. 2 centuries of accumulated belongings, left behind as if whoever walked out last expected to come back. Jack himself described it as a captivating little money pit. That phrase sounds charming when he says it. When you actually look at the condition of the building in those early episodes, it sounds like the world's most optimistic understatement. Here's the thing that viewers picked up on almost immediately, even if they couldn't articulate it. The house wasn't just damaged, it was intact. And there's a massive difference between the two. When buildings like this sit empty for years, they usually get picked clean. Valuable furniture goes. Copper pipework gets stripped. Anything worth anything disappears. That didn't happen here. What Jack and Jazzy walked into was closer to a sealed environment than an abandoned shell. Rooms full of belongings that had simply been left. Objects that nobody had thought to remove. A 19th century clergyman's diary. Boxes of old 78 RPM records. An 80-year-old pair of waterproofed canvas wading trousers, still in good enough condition that Jazzy actually put them on once they'd been cleaned out. A 1977 issue of Good Housekeeping. And the fused square lump of nails that Jack cheerfully referred to as a boxless box of nails. The cardboard container completely dissolved by the floods, the nails themselves welded together by time and moisture into a single solid object. This is where the channel became something different from every other renovation show on YouTube. Jack and Jazzy weren't just fixing a building, they were excavating a life, or several lives. And what their audience was watching wasn't really home renovation content at all. It was archeology. Every room was a layer, every object was evidence that someone had been here, had cared about this place, and had left it behind in circumstances nobody seems to have fully explained. Viewers felt that from the start. They just didn't know how to describe it. The channel's growth tells its own story. Jazzy's Instagram account crossed 1 million followers. The TikTok page racked up nearly 700,000 likes. A merchandise shop went live, selling products made from natural materials. None of that happened because people were fascinated by damp-proofing techniques or watching someone use a laser level. It happened because of the objects. The Treasure Tuesday Instagram series became its own event, A weekly reveal of whatever remarkable thing had turned up during that week's work. A locked room, a forgotten corner, a box that hadn't been opened in half a century. People kept coming back because the house kept delivering, and because there was always a sense that the next room might contain something nobody had expected. That mystery carried emotional weight that standard renovation content simply can't manufacture. Jack and Jazzy didn't script it. They didn't stage it. They just opened doors that hadn't been opened in years, pointed a camera, and let the house speak for itself. The house had plenty to say. What most casual viewers didn't see, running alongside all of this, was the scale of what was actually being planned for the property. This wasn't a couple working through a renovation to-do list room by room, hoping for the best. Behind the scenes, Jack and Jazzy had already brought in Matthew Montague Architects, a professional architecture practice, to draw up formal plans for the whole site. Not just the main house, the outbuildings too. 4 outbuildings sit on the property alongside the main building. The Architectural Commission covered extensions, structural alterations, and full conversion of those outbuildings into usable spaces. That's a project of a scope that most renovation channels never approach. It suggests that what Duncombe House Diaries was presenting as an ongoing domestic adventure was in parallel being managed as a serious, professionally designed restoration of a historically significant site. There's nothing dishonest about that, but it reframes what the audience was watching. The chaos, the discovery, the mushrooms on the ceiling, all of that was real. And underneath it, a much longer, more considered plan was already in motion. Then there's the constraint that the channel never dwells on, but that changes everything about the project's future. Duncombe House is a Grade 2 listed building. That designation, handed down under the Planning Act, means the property is officially recognized as having special architectural and historical importance. It also means the government has a direct say in what can and cannot be done to it. Grade 2 listing doesn't freeze a building in amber. Owners can still renovate, extend, and modify. But every structural decision requires approval. Materials need to be appropriate. Changes need to respect the character of the original build. You can't rip out 19th century stonework and replace it with something modern, just because it would be easier. You can't change the windows on a whim. You can't gut the features that give the building its listed status without going through a formal process that can take months and may well come back with a no. For a house built to the specification of Augustus Duncombe, in the mid-Victorian style associated with William Byrne, with original ashlar stonework and a slate roof and period bay windows still in place, that's a significant set of constraints. It means that even with the best architects in the world and an unlimited budget, certain parts of this house will never fully belong to its current owners. They belong to history, and history in this case has a legal team. What Duncombe House Diaries has confirmed across every episode it's put out is something that audiences sensed from the very beginning. This house was never an empty shell waiting to be filled with someone else's story. It already had one, a long, specific, complicated one, tied to a Victorian estate, a Scottish architect, a family that shaped the land around Ellistone for generations, and whoever left those rooms full of belongings and walked away without looking back. Jack and Jazzy didn't buy a house. They bought a custodianship. And what their audience keeps watching for, episode after episode, isn't the plastering or the pipework. It's the next room, the next locked door, the next object that survived everything the building threw at it. Because somewhere in this house, there are still answers. And whatever they are, Duncombe House Diaries will be there when they surface.